morning, Lagos. Good morning from wherever you're listening to. Hope you're having a great morning so far, and hope for those who are living in this part of the world that the rain has cooled down, whatever heat has been going on in the past few days. It is Smooth Breakfast here with Valentine.
And with Ayo.
And it's time for Freshly Pressed 981. This is where we look at the news stories for today in detail, and we have our guest analyst with us in studio. First off, good morning, Miss Funmi Odude.
Good morning, Ayo.
You
Good
can
morning, Lagos.
And like we mentioned earlier on, she's actually a great mind because she's wearing blue as well.
Oh, yes.
You can find Funmi Odude
And Ugo.
and Ugo as well.
So
So
it's a blue.
Oh my
Kindred
Thursday.
spirit.
kindred.
Coincidence.
All right, Ugo. Well, he's let the cat out of the bag. Ugo is here as well at Ugo Dre. Good morning, Ugo.
Hi, good morning, Ayo.
All right,
It
so
just seems like we planned it.
Yeah.
we did. We're totally matching.
mine.
In sync.
All right, very quickly, this is our handle. If you'd like to follow us on Twitter and leave your comments as well at Smooth981FM, hashtag Freshly Pressed 981 on
Yes.
WhatsApp.
You can also send messages through WhatsApp. That number is 0809 444 0981. That is our WhatsApp number. And you can send us messages through YouTube. So if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll always be the first to know when we come on live.
Yes.
You can also leave a comment using the live chat option. The section is there. It's youtube.com/smooth981FM.
Right.
Our first story is from the Punch newspaper. The headline reads, Senate attacks federal government, says only state police can stop banditry. Now, in this story, Funmi, the Senate yesterday berated the federal government for over its inability to tackle the alarming rate of insecurity in the country, particularly banditry in the northwest geopolitical zone. This was moved in a motion, separate motions led by the senator from Taraba State, Emmanuel Bacha, and his colleague from Zamfara, Kabir Marafa. They made a few suggestions, suggesting things relating to the 2019 appropriation bill and recommending state policing, among other factors. But your thoughts on this?
Okay, so we're back to a whole lot of talking with very little action. I mean, it just seems like we've been repeating the same things year in, year out, and it's not stopping the killings. We still have a high speed of insecurity across board.
Yeah.
The issue of state police, it's been discussed for so long, and for the I don't think it's the first time, but we seem to have a Senate that is amenable to it, and really they're the ones with the powers to start the process. It's going to take a constitutional amendment, and we've had a few amongst the 8th National Assembly, but it's obviously not something that anybody among them has presented or has attempted to start to present. So we can safely say that it's something the 8th National Assembly will not achieve. If considering the kind of debates and the kind of the process that it would take for us to achieve this, if we will ever achieve this, any National Assembly that wants to try to introduce state police, it has to be a bill that has to be introduced early enough in their administration, because I can imagine it's going to go through a lot of readings invitation for public bodies, going back to adjust one thing, going back to amend the other. So until we actually see somebody present a bill and we actually start the process, all of it will remain mere rhetoric. Another important aspect of the story, though, is they mentioned the police reform bill, which will tackle funding. And we know that apart from the very, very many problems plaguing our Nigerian police, funding is a huge part of it. So we're hoping that this bill gets passed before the 8th National Assembly is dissolved. At least let's move forward. If it's not the best we can achieve, let's at least move forward, because insecurity, apart from the fact, I mean, the most important thing is that we're losing lives that we should not be losing. But at the same time, it's also costing us economically, and we seem to prefer to use the money for intervention funds. I mean, the story talks about the fact that the Senate wants to make provision for a 10 billion naira intervention fund to cater for internally displaced persons, and it's sad, but
yes, well, I mean, these are real issues. Also curious, something curious I found in the story. The Boacha, who's from Taraba, suggested, given instances, examples of some family members, close family members of his that whose lives were lost in this crisis, he suggested that there should be legislative backing for individuals who wanted to carry arms for self-defense. Don't you find that curious too?
that is possibly the stupidest idea we could ever have.
Oh boy. Okay.
Because I mean, we have a problem with arms. Part of the issues we have with insecurity is the fact that we have a problems with
Arms being in
proliferation
the
of
wrong
small
hands.
arms.
Mhm.
And so, if we're now going to legitimize that, I mean,
No matter the clause that's placed on it.
we already have issues with people in traffic being in any. I mean, if I could just bring out my gun and my knife,
No.
we're not prepared for it as a country.
We
Thank
don't
you
want
for
to. We don't want to.
And let's move on to this day newspaper now for this next story. 2018, Lagos has highest foreign debt profile, Yobe lowest, according to statistics from the National Bureau of Statistics. They released this report as part of the Nigerian domestic and foreign debt data that's reflecting the 2018 fourth quarter, as posted on their website. Bogo. Looking at the details and the reports and outlining the achievements of the federal government vis-a-vis the deficit recorded both on the local and international climbs. What are your thoughts on this story?
Yeah, interesting. So according to the story, Nigeria's foreign debt stands at about $25 billion, right? And but if you look at if you go to the DMO's website, let me just give you a breakdown of Nigeria's debt as it stands today. So total domestic debt, it's about in naira 16.6 trillion naira. Okay. While you have, of course, like I said, it's actually $25.2 billion, and this is from the website of the Debt Management Office.
Yes.
Right, and then in total debt, the Nigeria's public debt, that's local and foreign in dollars, is about $79 billion. $79 billion. That's how much we owe the entire world. Wow. $79 billion, including Nigerians. And of course, in naira, that's about 24.3 trillion naira. Yeah. So
many generations of that.
So that's a whole lot of money.
We don't
the federal government has been making
the
moves
debt.
to see how they can implement policies that would
Which
offset
kind of
this
policy?
debt.
Is to continue to borrow.
And the conversation even will come up now in the next about tax.
Yeah,
But,
it's a lot of money. But in terms of so you look at country's debt profile in relation to something. So in relation to our GDP, is still quite low. Our GDP is roughly $400 billion or thereabout. So it's $79 billion compared to that. Still okay. There's some countries that their debt to GDP ratio is 1:1, which means So the point basically is that we can actually move from $79 billion to $400 billion. Not like I'm advocating that, but where the problem really is debt to service ratio. That's revenue service ratio. So if you look at how much debt you're servicing compared to revenue that you're making, that's where the problem is. And Nigeria, at some point, was spending over 40% of its revenue servicing debt. That is where the challenge is, Valentine.
Now, how does that reflect on Lagos in particular?
So Lagos, I don't know. So Lagos has its own debt profile compared to the federal government. So this is basically, the entire public debt, government's debt. But in terms of Lagos, we typically owe the most because, of course, Lagos is the richest state in Nigeria. So, I mean, we don't have to your head which made the most money. So typically, Lagos State will also owe the most. That's why United States owes the most money in the world as well. So that's how it works. So the richest people owe the most money, right? So you can't be poor and old. It doesn't really work like that. So Lagos State, I think for domestic debt, Lagos State domestic debt is about 530 billion naira.
We're making about 5.64%.
Yeah, and national debt. Yeah. So, but the state is robust, rich state, can basically pay its loans easily. But one thing the government is also trying to do is move away from reliance on domestic debt to foreign debt. They moved from about 73% to 68% in terms of the debt local to foreign debt mix. We want to see trend low, but there's a trade-off as well, because if you hold a lot more foreign debt, then you're exposed to foreign exchange risk.
Right.
So if there's another major devaluation, then we could be like a grace. You know what I mean? So you have that kind of problem again, because it means that you don't have enough forex reserve to meet up those debts. So you have to have a fine balance. But then if you borrow in your local currency, which is actually how we're able to avoid a lot of the economic crisis that happened, a decade ago, a lot of our debt was mostly in our local currency. So you can just print your way out of paying that and then suffer, the consequences of high inflation. But then you're paying high interest rate because the government is borrowing now at 14-15%, which is exorbitant. And it's actually affecting a lot of things, affecting the stock market as well. So if people these days, if you have free cash, what do? You go and buy FGM bonds or you buy treasury bills. People don't want to buy anything else because the rates there are just too attractive. So 12, 13, even banks are buying. Yeah, the risk is lower. So government is just borrowing out and like pushing out the private sector, from the debt market. So that's basically the disadvantages. So that's why they want to move away from domestic debt to foreign debt and just shift it to maybe 60-40.
All right, before we go on,
thank you for analyzing that very
thanks, Ugo. We had to take a comment from Twitter here at Smooth981FM. Steve Obiako says, without state policing and community county policing system, going back to state police, we cannot deal with these cold clashes here and there in Lagos and other community-based crimes across the country. The federal cops just protect the elites.
Let's move on to this next story. I'll come to you, Funmi, for your analysis on this one from Thisday newspaper. The headline reads, courts have legitimized vote buying. Falana alleges. That's the human rights lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Femi Falana. He alleged that the courts have legitimized vote buying, taking us back to the timeline around 1999 when Olusegun Obasanjo was the president at the time. He said that he made an instance where the bags of rice and salt and gari were distributed to entice voters for the candidate of the ruling party, then General Olusegun Obasanjo, who's retired. And he was speaking on a forum, the 9th Forum of Anti-Corruption Situation Room, that was conducted in conjunction with the EFCC, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, and the Human and Environmental Development Agenda. But looking through the details and the things he said, I mean, what do you think, talking in line with INEC's push to fight vote buying by implementing policies in that regard?
Yes, and I think what we should always start from is the laws, which is what the INEC chairman focused more on in his own aspect, reform of the Electoral Act. So regarding election petitions in Nigeria, it's usually quite difficult to overturn an election, and the reason is simple. Any infractions that you complain about, the Electoral Act itself says that you must prove and show that it substantially affected the results of the elections. So if you put out allegations of people were sharing rice, people were sharing gari, sharing money, I mean, those are electoral offenses. But in order for you to be able to overturn the election on that ground, you must now go the extra mile to prove that those actions actually affected the results, which is why I think the INEC chairman focused more on the creating a commission to deal with electoral offenses. A separate commission. And that is part of what has been advocated since the Uwe's report. That's the Justice Mohammed Uwe's led Electoral Reform Committee sometime in 2008, 2009. The unbundling of INEC to be able to deal with different things. And so he's made that call again, that the National Assembly should accelerate work on the Electoral Offences Commission bill as a way to deal with those offenses and prescribe stiffer punishments for those things, vote buying, carrying of, breaking the order not to carry smartphones into polling units and all of that. So yes, the courts would only enforce what the law provides. So it always starts with the reform of our Electoral Act. And really, I do believe that if we unbundle INEC, I mean, INEC is the one conducting the elections, is the one supervising the political parties, and then
administering these punitive measures again.
Exactly. So I think his call is right. If we can do that, maybe we'll see more progress in this regard.
All right, thank you so much, Funmi. Let's come back to the story now from the Punch newspaper. I'll come to you, Ugo Dre, for the analysis on this. PDP backs Tinubu over VAT increments. When I saw this story of the headline, I thought, what an interesting alliance on an idea. Well, they were speaking at a parley. Well, it was termed the 11th Bola Tinubu Colloquium at the International Conference Center in Abuja. Ugo, here they speak almost in the same voice, calling or encouraging the federal government to go back on their indications or interests in increasing the VAT. What are your thoughts on this story, please?
Very nice headline. They kind of like very good attention grabbing headline. I mean, like two different things entirely. Like as you recall, I think it was sometime last week or so, Bola Tinubu or 2 weeks ago said that he wasn't in support of increasing VAT, which I mean everybody understands, why he's not in support of it. VAT has been 5% since introduction in the 90s or so, and it hasn't changed since then. And 5% compared to countries around the world and even around the sub-Saharan Africa, that's basically increased VAT. And VAT is one of the most efficient ways of collecting tax for the government, and it's worked and worked and worked. So if there's an easy way for government to just increase taxes, is to just raise VAT. But then VAT affects everyone because it's a consumption tax. It's a tax that is paid by the final user, not actually the producers. So people who produce things or service, who give render service to you, are actually not paying VAT. So they just sort of transfer it. It's the way it works. So the final guy consuming the product is the one who pays VAT. So that's why government is like, at the end of the day, if you increase VAT, it's basically a tax on Nigerians, like consumers.
It will increase the price of
goods and services. So typically it will increase price of goods and services. So PDP is sort of aligning to that, but I don't know whether it's PDP that's aligning to it or whether it's just somebody in
PDP
secretary,
PDP national publicity
secretary, because I do know that one of the PDP's policy trust basically is to be they're quite free markets. They're for free markets basically, and free markets actually means that free markets don't actually like tax hikes, basically, right? Unlike the Buhari government, which is a bit more socially inclined, who would prefer to increase taxes. But then it's good that they align on one thing.
And they're suggesting for a wider tax net.
That's what everybody has said.
This has been said again and again. We'll take a few comments before we go on to our other stories. This is from Yinka. Yinka says, Ugo, I beg you in the name of God. That's your last statement should be made. That's the statement about the about owing, and since we have compared to the US, we're not owing that much, because now the excuse for some people in Abuja to keep borrowing. You now hear things like, after all, America is owing more than us. Even amongst ourselves, already using terms like borrow me, Joe. After all, FG they borrow. All right. Thank you very much. Now, since we're talking about numbers, let's still stick to some numbers, and I'll stay with you for this, Ugo. Banks to tighten lending conditions for corporate loans in Q2 2019. Now, the deposit money banks have said that they will tighten lending conditions for granting corporate loans in the second quarter of 2019. This was made in a report titled Credit Condition Survey by the Central Bank of Nigeria. They disclosed this in their report. Can you please take us through this story?
Yeah, so what they're saying in a nutshell is that if you're a company and you want to borrow money from a bank in the second quarter of this year, maybe that's what you budgeted for. Better arrange yourself for. They are not willing to borrow again. Like, they're going to borrow, but it's going to be stiffer. So they're going to ask you for your head, your eyes, your nose, anything, just so that they can be sure that you're going to pay back that loan. So it's just and banks are doing this because they're looking at non-performing loans, and even though it was much better in the first quarter of this year, they sort of project that it might get worse.
Why so though?
And that's probably because of the economic outlook. So they're seeing that maybe things might tighten up a bit more, inflation might spike, and whatever indices it is that they're working on, they're saying that maybe there might be default risk down the line. But the interesting part is that as banks are moving towards being a bit conservative in terms of lending, microfinance banks are getting aggressive. They are really, really aggressive. These guys are willing to borrow money from you at 20-25% even, right? Yeah, because they basically lend at maybe 5% per month to people. I mean, I posted on Twitter some time ago that I applied for one, just trying to test it, and I got it in less than a day or so, 2 days. Yeah, and I never saw anybody. Nobody came to me. Nothing. We're just talking on the chat, and I got the loan.
I've seen
Yes.
a few of those adverts saying, "Oh, get a loan quickly." It's almost
It
become
works
what-
like they so far you have like a regular income, like a salary, and you can show it in your bank account and
Yes.
all. They just lend the money to you. So banks are also looking at that. There's a lot of competition for them, especially in the personal loan space. But in terms of corporate loan, they own that space and they're like, look, we got to manage the risk here, and we can. And the interesting thing, like I said, is people who have money that borrow money. So the people who are defaulting are their friends as well. So,
Exactly. All right. Thank you very much for that one. Funmi, federal government approves 1.3 billion naira to offset death benefits of 497 workers. This is from Premium Times. It looks like we're talking numbers a lot this morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
But this time is on pensions.
the best story today.
Yes.
The best story today. So this is fantastic news. So apparently there's been a verification of next of kin beneficiaries for 563 deceased civil service workers, and well, the government has now approved to pay the death benefits for 497 of them.
Yeah.
So it is fantastic news. I mean, part of the reason we seem to lose part of the best brains for the federal civil service is conditions of service. I mean, the private sector always take out the best brains because of better conditions of service. And when you look at the fact that it's headache to get your pensions, it's headache for your beneficiaries to get out anything after you've sacrificed 35 years in service, it's disheartening. So yes, this is like the best news today.
Amazing. And they also the report touches very quickly on the Pensions Reform Act, which talks about employers with of labor with no less than 5 employees to ensure to a minimum of 3 times of the annual total emolument. I'm talking about this because some people were not aware of this when we were speaking about this about a week or so ago, as to how many number of employees an employer should have before he starts taking on insurance.
Insurance, yes, it's not less than 5 employees. And I think in Nigeria we actually have low employee education. So most employees don't even know their rights.
They don't.
Talking about pension, talking about payee,
Insurance,
making sure that
yes.
your employer is remitting the payee that is deducted from your salaries and all of that. So they actually have a low education on that.
Thank you very much. All right,
A few messages.
Okay, let's take messages.
Before we continue now, Big T says, I think the analyst is wrong on the issue of legalizing small arms. We have relied on the police. That has failed. The issue is not the arms, but the status of it. Why should drug-induced young men kill, rape, steal almost without challenge? Because they are armed. Legalize small arms, register and categorize arms, so doctors, business owners, teachers, and other responsible citizens can defend themselves. And that is just a prelude to chaos. That's what
America is still dealing with it at the
Yes.
moment.
And RD says, good morning, legalize or not, guns are still available to those who want them. Now, that leaves some of us helpless and at the mercy of kidnappers, abductors, you name it. So I think we should legalize guns, he said, to give some of us a fighting chance. If a robber knows that there's a chance that you have a gun, he would surely think twice before breaking down that gun.
Just throwing billion upon our
money.
on 5 billion naira automatic aircraft firefighting simulator, Daily Times, and this is with regards to the impact on our nation with regards to health and safety standards in the air, in the aviation space. Please take us through the story.
Okay, so it's a bit of good news, I think. I'm not really sure whether this price is competitive. $5 billion, that's like $14 million, and this is just firefighting simulator. So what it basically means is that firefight.
That's not what you think. Do you think human life has a premium on it, like Ugo has said? I should ask the insurance companies. Our final story here for you, Funmi. Senate moves to override Buhari's veto on constitution income bill. It's a very long article in the Telegraph.
And
But I know you do justice in a few minutes.
in 1 minute that we
I
have
ran
left.
away from it.
No, okay, so Nigerians have to go with this because, half the time we always accuse both the presidency and the National Assembly of not carrying out thorough debates about these things. And so I remember we had that story a few while back where the president gave his reasons.
Yes,
for
very
not
detailed reasons.
very detailed reasons, and the way people were quite impressed. So the National Assembly, the Senate has said, okay, we're going to override the president's veto on some of this, and they also give their reasons as well. As to why that is why I think people should go read the article.
Yes.
It
It's a very
looks
interesting
like
article.
we are beginning to have stimulating conversations among our senators. I mean, part of it, particularly the two that I'm particularly interested in, is the bill that deals with the early presentation and passage of appropriation bill. I mean, it's something that we've talked about here. That let's make it a part of our law. So time
So-
the bill must come, so that we actually abide with our financial calendar for once in this country. And then we have the president refusing on constitutional grounds. I feel like it breaches another law. I feel like, and they have also, it's something that Nigerians should go read. We are having stimulating conversations from our senators.
great.
But it's a lame
enjoy
duck
it.
Senate, so I mean they are going very soon.
Yeah, so we are having this at the end
Yeah,
of their
it's lame
tenure.
duck.
You know,
right?
Valentine said something earlier when we were preparing for the news. It seems like they just woke up all of a sudden.
Yeah.
They're passing
No,
bills here and there.
They've
they're-
been really vocal.
Then the
in
other one
recent
is the
times.
Income Tax Relief Amendment Act, extending the pioneer industry for some companies, and
Good.
so we're out
Alright.
of time, but
Thank you
Go
very
read it,
much,
so-
Funmi. Like Funmi mentioned, it's in the new Telegraph. If you'd like to read it, about 4 pages, but worth the read.
Yes.
Right.
Quick messages here. This one is from Johnson from Ogudu. He says, "Hello, how can you procure a training simulation equipment for 5 billion naira when there are no firefighting equipment?" Interesting. And Lorenzo says, "If a robber knows there's a gun, he's more likely to be more violent. More guns means more
More
death. We do not want another Columbine killing. Capital, no," he said. Sheung says,
Last one.
"The equipment is a cylindrical container with gas nozzles that can simulate a fire. It cannot be worth 5 billion naira," he said.
Nah, you sabi.
All right, Lagos and the rest of the world, thank you so much for listening this morning. We have had Funmi at Funmi Odude on Twitter, and also Ugo at Ugo Dre on Twitter. And of course, Valentine and I are still here.
Yes.
But we'll go on a break. When we come back at 8:15, it's time for us to look at some entertainment stories, review some new songs on the grapevine.